Well, welcome back, everybody. We are now hitting chapter 6, one of my favorite chapters. Maybe not my favorite, but very close. I would say, if you put it to me, I would say television and film are probably the two that I really like talking the most about. As the semester progresses. But obviously, we've reached another exceptional form of mass communication, in all likelihood, one of the most powerful forms of mass communication in television and cable and the power of visual culture. So this is actually chapter 6 in your textbook. So I would strongly encourage you, along with these PowerPoints, to make sure that you are reading your text. So this is actually, and I also lay this out, obviously, in your instructions in the Canvas module, but this is going to be split into 3 parts. So there'll be 3 different parts on YouTube for you to watch. And in addition, we're going to be using some visual examples. YouTube, of course, is getting very particular about copyright. So I'm going to give you, obviously, the links outside of here, and also in the PowerPoint if you want to, take advantage of that. But I'm only going to be showing you at least maybe 1 or 2 things actually live during this recorded, these recorded lectures on YouTube. But otherwise, it's kind of on you to I would say, pause when we get to those points, maybe open up another browser, and then watch, and then come back to the lecture, or you can watch the lecture through and then watch it, kind of separately. So anyway, I hope that makes sense. But anyway, in this chapter, we're going to be basically talking about a lot of different things. I want to first go through, in this particular YouTube clip that you're watching with me now, we're going to go through some of the numbers and some of the influence that television has, and how that's extended out to, obviously, streaming content, which is also, I think, you can consider part of the television universe. Part 2 is going to be dealing more with the history of television. And so I'm going to be, television, like any other form of mass communication, has a rich evolution. And so we're going to be talking about evolution. And then finally, in part 3, assuming you watch these in order, part 3 is going to be talking more about the sort of the programming and genres of television, how and when they started, and where they are today. And then we'll wrap it up in that part 3 with kind of talking about a little more of the economics and how television measures an audience and remains profitable. All right, so let's get to chapter 6, part 1, which is by the numbers. But first, before I get there, I want to talk about the fact that we've used this word frequently this semester so far. It's called the convergence of television. So here's the interesting thing about TV. I grew up in an era back when I was a kid, and through my teenage years, and even through, probably half of my adult life, where I was used to having very limited choices on television. I was used to watching things kind of at a set time, meaning that, for example, if I wanted to watch my favorite show, right, which of course I was up way too late last night catching up on Ozark, right? But I was doing that on Netflix, right? I could watch it when I wanted, but that wasn't always the case. And so it wasn't all that long ago that TV was really kind of basically, here in LA or anywhere else, was basically 3 major networks. There were a couple of independent stations. You could watch public broadcasting, which we'll talk about later. But beyond that, there wasn't much. And then obviously cable came along, and we'll talk about cable in this chapter as well. But the bottom line is that you really kind of had to sort of, you had a regular time slot that things aired, and you didn't have a lot of opportunity, at least early on in my life, to be able to watch them kind of a la carte, or to be watching them at any given time. And so that's really changed with, first with obviously the VCR, then there was cable television, And now, of course, in the internet age, whether it be on our computers or on our phones or iPads or wherever you're watching this, the fact is that, we're able to watch all sorts of entertainment, which includes television entertainment, across multiple platforms and in multiple ways. So that's why convergence is so synonymous with this network. It has also meant that you have an audience that is split now. So at one point, network audience, ABC, NBC, CBS, that's what I mean when I say network, was 90%, like 90% of all viewing at one point in the 70s. Well, so if you just took a random time at like 8 o'clock at night, right, on a Thursday, 90% of everyone watching television at that point was watching network. And of course that's all over the map now because there are so many different choices. So we're going to be talking a lot about that today in this particular YouTube clip, I should say, part, and then we'll probably swing back to it at various times here over the next 3 parts. So anyway, and as always, I encourage you that if anything I say is a little confusing or if you have a question, you always are welcome to send me a note on Canvas, and I'll try to get back to you in a very timely manner. So let's go through the numbers, guys, shall we? So, I've got a number of graphics to share with you. And again, if for some reason this doesn't look too clear on screen, you can download this off your Canvas shell because it is included. But anyway, the number of commercial TV stations in the United States, and you can see how much television grew from basically around 1950, which, by the way, when we get into history, we'll talk about the fact that television actually precedes 1950. But really from about 1950 to about, I'd say just a couple of years ago, you can see that it was 98 stations back in 1950. And now we're looking in the, just above 1,700. So you can see the exponential growth of television, particularly between 1950 and I would say, 75 was probably or even 1950 to the 1960s. You can really see that that's where television exploded. And then you can also see then where cable kind of came into play. And that's why there's so many different stations and so many different options. So, television stations abound. And again, I know your generation isn't the biggest television watchers because you guys are watching a lot of your content on YouTube, your TikTok users or whatever. But the bottom line is a lot of the things that you watch have an origin in the television universe. Or if you're like me, which I assume you might be watching a lot of your streaming content on your big screen television in your house, right? Because you have a smart television. And that's kind of what I do. So anyway, really interesting time to be alive, I guess, if you could say. All right, these are the number of TV households in the United States from 2001, which obviously is the turn of the century, to just about a year ago. And you can see that even within the last 20 years, we've seen growth within the numbers of people watching in the millions. So on the left-hand side, there's over 120 million households, which is the most. And of course, it doesn't take a genius to figure out, guys, that the more that we get, the more our population grows in the US, obviously, the more TV households we're going to have. And television's interesting because it doesn't matter whether you're wealthy or you're economically disadvantaged. The fact is that in general, television is what I call universal. It's in everybody's house. It's just a matter of maybe, somebody having 2 televisions or 1 television in the house versus having, several more. So anyway, leading ad-supported broadcast and cable networks among adults ages 18 to 49. Why do I spotlight 18 to 49? Because that is the sweet spot for the advertising, what I call the advertisers who are trying to reach the demographic, the age group spread, where anyone between 18 and 49 really are considered the people that buy the most, right? That are the most influenced by the advertisements, that have the most do the most purchasing in this age group. And so therefore 18 to 49 is really what every advertiser is targeting, at least age group. So me being 55, soon to be 56, I'm outside of that. And there's some truth to that, because honestly, I don't buy in terms of just buying other than groceries and things that I just need to kind of exist. I don't buy a lot of as much stuff as I used to. I have probably stuff that I want to get rid of at this point, and that's pretty typical. Not to mention, anyone over my age group is probably, more in the retirement age and probably doesn't have the, I would say, the bank account or the constant influx of cash to be constantly buying. Anyone under the age of 18, you guys all know this. If you're taking this class and you're in high school or have just been recently in junior high or high school, then you know that you're kind of relying on either you're working at a minimum wage job or something that's above that, so you're not making a lot of money, or you're relying on your folks to kind of help you out, and so your buying power isn't as strong as someone who, say, is in their late 20s, early 30s, mid 30s, that is working a full-time job and not having to focus on school as well. So I'm not trying to be I'm not trying to cast aspersions on anybody. I'm just saying it's just on average that's what's happening here with different age groups and their buying power, right? So anyway, Fox is this is an average day in this age group of how many people are actually watching a particular network. Fox, that's not Fox News, by the way, that's actually the Fox network, two different things, 1.4 million, and NBC and ABC. It's interesting now that Fox is number one, because it wasn't all that long ago that Fox wasn't even a network. It began in the late 80s, and now, of course, it's a mainstay. So anyway, you can see the numbers there. And the first cable network, by the way, is number 5, which is ESPN, which is, kind of the, what is it called? The worldwide leader in sports, right? So, and ESPN obviously getting a lot of, a lot of play throughout the year whenever, something is happening, either in the fall, it's a lot of NFL. In the spring, it's the NCAA basketball tournament, a lot of golf, everything in between. All right. Anyway, most expensive TV shows of all time. Okay. I thought you'd be interested in seeing this. This is just how much money is in television. And again, television, when I say television, I'm not saying network television, although network television, again, used to spend a lot of money on episodes, but this is actually a kind of a combination of television, streaming media, right? And what I mean by streaming content, Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hulu, HBO Max, Disney Plus, etc. So the Lord of the Rings, which is Amazon Prime, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that's going to be debuting this year, or if you're watching this, maybe down the road, it may have already just debuted. Regardless, the fact is that the entire season of Lord of the Rings, first season, is going to cost Amazon $465 million to make that first season. A staggering amount of money. Although when we're talking about Amazon, probably a drop in the bucket, right? The next one is MCU Loki. Sorry, guys, if I butchered that name, if you're familiar with it. Falcon and the Winter Soldier. That's on Disney Plus. I have not seen. I'll be honest. I don't own Disney Plus, so I've not heard of this. But it is $25 million an episode, approximately, to shoot. There was a mini series that was put together by Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks back, I want to say, 15, 16 years ago. I'm just ballparking it. I might be wrong. I might be off a year or two. But anyway, it was called The Pacific. And actually, it's related to the Band of Brothers, which is down there at the bottom. So they also did Band of Brothers, which was a mini series by HBO that came out soon after Saving Private Ryan. In the late 90s. I think this one made its debut around 2000, 2001. And basically, it was all about the 101st Airborne landing in Europe during World War II. And eventually, of course, they were instrumental, not just in D-Day, but were on the European continent, if you will, when Hitler surrendered in 1945. So Band of Brothers was highly successful for HBO at the time. They were spending a tremendous amount of money per episode, $12.5 million. And of course, the follow-up to that was The Pacific, which was all about the, our fight with the Japanese in the Pacific Theater. It is riveting television, by the way. So if you ever get a chance to watch either miniseries and you're interested in history or just interested in good storytelling, I can't recommend it enough. But the fact is that HBO spent $12.5 million on Band of Brothers, and then the Pacific was 20 to 21 million per episode. So a tremendous amount of money there. Certainly, you guys are probably familiar with Game of Thrones, although every year that goes by, the last season or the series ended. I think the series ended in 2019, but in any event, it was HBO's main show for several years. It was $15 million an episode, and it's also the reason why HBO really kind of wrapped that series up quickly. It was costing the HBO a fortune, and HBO was interested in kind of focusing some of its resources on Westworld, which is another big hit for HBO. And of course, there's been a number of great series, and we'll talk more about that when we get to episodic television. C on Apple TV is $15 million per episode. The morning show on Apple TV, which, obviously Apple has now gotten into the streaming service, $15 million per episode for the morning show. ER, by the way, is still on here. And it's interesting because ER was actually a show in the 1990s that was an NBC mainstay. It was George Clooney's claim to fame. That's how he became famous, because he was actually a regular on that series. Anyway, that back in the 90s was $13 million per episode, but it was also crushing it in the ratings. It was being watched by, a ton of people across the country. And so, NBC was able to make a fortune off advertising, and clearly was able to spend $13 million per episode. And then last but not least, I can't, again, if you're looking for something cool to watch and you like history and like a little bit of gossip, I say gossip, but, a little bit of creative license in the storytelling, The Crown is really great. I'm caught up on that. It's all about the royal family and Queen Elizabeth. And it's amazing because it basically starts off with the series starts off with her when she comes to power. And that was in the early 50s. And here we are in 2022, and she's still going, and she's in her mid 90s. It's amazing. So anyway, so those are your most expensive TV shows of all time. And so obviously, if you're in the television universe, it is not cheap to obviously make these shows, but they are amazing. All right, number of Netflix paid subscribers. Okay, so we could go through all these streaming services. I'm just going to kind of show you, some general numbers here, but you can see that this is how Netflix has grown from the first quarter in 2013. This is not when Netflix started, by the way. If you remember, Netflix started sooner than this, and it started out as a DVD delivery service, and then it just kind of made its way into streaming content. And it's fascinating because Blockbuster Video at the time, which is now insolvent, right, bankrupt, one of the had an opportunity to actually buy Netflix for literally pennies on the dollar and opted not to. And it's probably one of the biggest stumbles of all time. In any event, you can see it's grown quite a bit, and it grew quite a bit within the last couple of years, in particular, not just because of the content that's being shown on the network, because it's amazing content, the popularity of it, yes, but I think Netflix has also benefited certainly in the last 2 years from the fact that we've been in a pandemic and people have been staying home more. At one point, we weren't even going to movie theaters because we weren't allowed to, right? They were closed. And so the next best thing was for Netflix, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, Hulu, et cetera, all these Apple TV, all these different streaming services to really kind of fill the void. Speaking of streaming services, here's your most popular, how many subscribers that they have. Netflix with 213.5 million is at the top. Amazon Prime at 175. Anime, Crunchyroll is all about anime, apparently. That is 120 million, Disney Plus. So your first four there, three of which, you probably have some sort of combination of at home or on your phone. are all over the 100 million mark. Peacock, which is obviously NBC Universal's foray into streaming, is there. And just so you know, there, it's interesting because Peacock is NBC, Paramount Plus would be CBS. So it's really interesting to see like network, ABC, NBC, CBS, they're all now getting into the streaming platform because that's where we're getting all of our content. So it's really changing in real time as we talk about this chapter. HBO Max and HBO 45.2 million. We'll talk a lot about HBO coming up here in part 2 and in part 3, honestly. Hulu 42.8, Apple TV 19 million. Most popular. So I wanted to highlight this because think about it. We are at the 2-year anniversary. We are at the 2-year anniversary, or at least it's been 2 years since 2+ years since the pandemic started. And of course, I don't need to tell you that we all had to go shelter in place, right? We were going to flatten the curve, and that was going to be a couple of weeks, and then everything was going to be back to normal. Well, we know that that's not true. It's the gift that keeps on giving. So what it did do, though, is it sent us basically into our homes, to our apartments, right? We were not out. Movie theaters were closed, right? And so therefore, we turned to television, right, to basically entertain ourselves, not to mention probably, find a release for the stress of being in a pandemic that we had never been a part of before. Of course, we know a lot more about it now, 2 years later. I know that there are still some people out there that are deeply concerned about it. Others, I think have decided, as long as they take the precautions, whatever that is, to stay safe, that they can kind of move about. But the fact is that 2 years ago, we weren't at that psychological, on a broad scale, we weren't at that psychological point. So we stayed indoors and we turned to streaming content to kind of pass the time. Well, this was at the height, I believe, this week, March 31st to April 6th. This is really at the height of when, in 2020, when we were kind of like burrowed in our caves, right? And so we were watching a lot of TV. And you can see here's what was happening 2 years ago. Maybe you were watching Stranger Things on Netflix. I definitely know a lot of you were watching Tiger King, by the way. That was another Netflix series. So Netflix was making money hand over fist, by the way, during the height of the pandemic. But you can look at those names: Mandalorian. By the way, that fourth one, La Casa de Papel, which is Money Heist. I don't know if you've ever seen that show on Netflix, but I just wrapped up watching it. They finally finished the series, and it's fun. It's a very cool series. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. Obviously, Star Wars, Disney, leaning into its connection with the Star Wars brand. Doing both the Mandalorian and the Clone Wars, very, very popular on all these downloads. Ozark, which, if you haven't seen Ozark, it's with Jason Bateman, Laura Linney. Tremendously good series, very dark. And I'll be honest with you, I had seen the first two seasons, and then it was off for a while, and then I finally got around to watching season 3 just a couple of weeks ago, and I actually had to go back and watch season 2 to kind of remind myself before going forward. That's kind of the pitfall of watching streaming media, right? Because you can binge watch everything, and then it's a full year before you get another season, and a lot of times you forget specifically how the season previous went. Yeah, modern problems, right? Anyway, there you go. Narcos, by the way, just wrapped up as well on Netflix. Another amazing series that deals with all of the, relationship and evolution of not just the Colombian cartels down in Medellin with Pablo Escobar, but later it actually dives into the whole thing, our relationship and Mexico's relationship with the cartels, which is, and it talks about a young El Chapo. So another strong recommendation there from me. And it's interesting, Star Trek, CBS All Access was the only, as I'm looking here, was the only network television programming that was in that top grouping. But that's still, think about it, that's a lot of people watching a lot of content right there. This is kind of a wonky graphic, but I kept it in here. Distribution of daily video content consumption among teenagers in the US from the fall of 2015 to the fall of 2020. And basically what I want you to glean out of this is that streaming media is where you guys are watching. YouTube is where you're watching. And you can see the fall off in cable television as basically YouTube improves. See, YouTube goes up as cable TV goes down. And what that proves to me is that you guys are watching less and less of cable television, less television in general, and you're leaning into YouTube. And of course, Netflix has been very consistent. Hulu is significantly smaller, along with some other streaming content, just because I think Netflix is really kind of the big dog. Feel free to differ. You might have something else you watch more of, but certainly from fall of 2015 to fall of 2020, that's what was happening. All right, last but not least, before we hit pause on this and go to part two, 60% of millennials and Gen Z consumers stream video daily versus 30% of the baby boomers. So I am not a boomer, by the way, just want to put it out there. Baby boomers are basically the 65 and over crowd, 60 and over crowd, I think it is. They are more traditional television watchers, like, watching cable television. They watch ABC, NBC, CBS. They're not the cord cutters like you guys are. So I think this is definitely a reflection on your generation being more comfortable with watching, things on like Netflix and Disney Plus and Amazon Prime, etc. Interestingly enough, most TV viewing is in the South. West Virginia, by the way, 3.82 hours per day. Sorry, I had to shrink that in, but it's out. HPD stands for hours per day. And believe it or not, Alaska is the least at 1.85. And my guess is because, Alaska is a much more I never lived in Alaska, but from what I understand from friends that have, is that, there's a lot of time spent outdoors in Alaska, and television viewing isn't, necessarily at the top of the list. On the average TV viewing per day, on average TV viewing per day occupied the most time in 2020 at 3.3 hours a day, eclipsing social media. Was trying to look for a little more modern stat to that, and a lot of these deep dives on this data is still either showing 2020 or 2021. But regardless, in a snapshot in 2020, your average TV viewing per day was 3.1 hours, social media 2 hours 3 minutes. If you combine the two, that's over 5 hours a day that were on some kind of screen, right? In 2020, 232 million people watched streaming or downloaded video across all devices in the US. That's just, that's basically 2/3, if not more, 75% of the actual population in this country. So that's pretty impressive. 58% of above used television to watch streaming content, 43% via smartphone. Where do you fall? My guess is your generation, you're younger, you're probably watching more on your smartphone than your television. But this is one of those things where, we'd love to have a conversation with you face to face about this, but not. So, so think about where you, reflect on where do you watch most of your stuff, right? Squid Game, by the way, last September, everyone remembers the Squid Game. I will be honest, I only watched a couple of moments of it. It was a big hit with my wife, but there was 1.65 billion hours watched the first 28 days in its release. That is the most in Netflix history. So everyone was talking about the Squid Game last September. Well, there was a good reason for it, because a lot of people were watching a lot of hours of Squid Game, last September. Super Bowl 55 this was the highest. So let me explain this. Super Bowl 55 in 2021 was the highest viewed television program at 92.8 million. Tampa Bay versus KC. That was Super Bowl 55. This year's Super Bowl, by the way, in case you care, Super Bowl 56, which was the Rams and the Bengals, I believe came in at 114 million. So 22 more million people watched the Super Bowl this year than last year. And I think that's a reflection on the fact of two things. One, the LA effect. Number 2 market in the country, LA is, a lot of eyeballs from a lot of Rams fans watching the game. And it had been a while since Cincinnati had been in the game. So a lot of Bengals, a lot of interest in just the, possibility of the Bengals winning the Super Bowl last year. So, but you can see the whole point is if you look at the top 10 television shows in terms of how many people watched in the top 10, 9 of them, eight, the first 8 were all football, NFL related. And so it's no secret why the NFL has got a multi-billion-dollar package with not just the networks, but cable television and now streaming content. The NFL is king in terms of how many people are actually watching it. And then, by the way, number 9 was Oprah with Meghan and Harry. I forget what this aired on. Maybe ABC, I'm thinking. I'd have to look it up. But anyway, Oprah with talking to Meghan Markle and Prince Harry. 21 million people tuned in for that. I was not one of them. I really don't care about either, but that's the beauty of entertainment, right? We can all choose what we want to watch. So that is some data that I wanted to leave you with in part 1. Again, I encourage you to go through this, and if you want to research anything more, maybe I've given you some ideas here. But that is going to be part 1. When you see me again in part 2, we're going to be getting into the history of television. So I will see you in part 2, but glad you're along for this journey in chapter 6.